This section explains the normal progression of speech development in young children. There is a very natural development of children's speech because the mechanics needed to create sounds is more difficult for some of the more difficult sounds. The easiest sounds that the children to produce are the p, m, the sounds that are at the front of the mouth. Here is a chart showing the normal expected development of speech sounds. Obviously there are going to be some children that fit outside these brackets. There are some children that are really quick with speech and get all their speech sounds really early. But these are what we call the norms. So we expect children from 18 months up to 3 to have developed the sounds of p, m, h, n, w, b. They're the first sounds that they're doing, which is why probably we're called mummy, because we like to be the ones that they want to be the first words that they say. So they're the first sounds. Now we then move on, and then the more difficult sounds, the sounds that come from the back of the mouth, the k and the g sounds, and the d and the t, that bit further back, are the next sounds that develop. Now, by the time you get your children into nursery at 2 and 3, they've got the majority of these sounds. They might have all their sounds. But some of the sounds they're probably not going to have are the more difficult sounds. The s and the j, the v, and you'll see there's a zh there. The zh sound, ZH, doesn't come at the beginning of any word, but it does come in the middle of words like treasure and measure. So it's not got it. It doesn't ever start a word. But these are developmental norms. Now, I took this from a chart quoted from February 1972. Now, they could have written this in 1072. They could write it in 3072. To my knowledge, we're not going to change the mechanics of speech that much that it is ever going to change, because that's what happens naturally in all children. And once they start in their language, these are the English language ones. Different languages have different sounds and children develop those sounds. But the basic sounds will still come first, so p, b, whatever language. And because that's how children develop their sounds, as we move on to working with predis, they're the first sounds we're going to play with. For the simple reason that what we're teaching children with predis is the concept of hearing and listening and thinking about that first sound. Now, if we're first of all working with sounds that we know that they are confident with and can do, then the concept of the learning on top of something they can already do is much easier. If you were to try and teach them the concept and you were using sounds like v and j, they can't say those sounds. So, it's incredibly hard then to have to get them to think about listening for them. And, it's all and good saying it's a jelly, go and find the jelly, and they come back and say it's a lelly because they can't say the j sound yet. So it's that we're teaching the concept on sounds they can do. And then they've learnt that concept of listening and identifying the sounds. Then we can move on to the more difficult sounds, because they've got the concept, so that's now a fixed skill, and then you move on to the more difficult sounds for them. So we're going to follow the developmental norms of children to introduce the predis sounds. Let's use what they can do instead of us forcing on them. Now this is where predis differs to most of the programs, because most of the programs start with letters. One of the sounds in virtually every program is a s, simply because it's used a lot in words. But actually, if you think about it, it's hard for the children to produce. And it's actually sometimes quite a hard sound for them to hear, especially if they've got any problems with hearing, because it's a very quiet sound. So it's a hard sound to hear, and it's a hard sound to produce. So yeah, actually, let's do what they can do, start with. Okay, which sounds are we going to use? We suggest that you introduce the sounds in the suggested order shown here. Choose pictures from just one of the sounds in word initial position, the first letter, from the first block to start the programme. Use pictures from sounds within this block as support pictures. Support pictures are words that begin with a sound different to the target sound for that week. Tick the letter off once you've targeted that sound for the week as a reminder. Continue introducing all the sounds from the first block using the alternative sounds within that block as support pictures. Then work through the sounds in the second block, using all the pictures used to date as support pictures, whilst introducing new support pictures from sounds within that group. Continue working through the sounds in this order until all the sounds are in use. You will see that we do not have pictures starting with the letters K, Q or X. Now you know about how sounds are made, you will understand that the K and the C pictures all start with the K sound. Similarly, if you feel yourself saying Q, you will hear and feel that the first sound is actually a K, and therefore we haven't included it as Predis is looking purely at sounds. And finally, the X. Now, two words that spring to mind with X are X-ray, which starts with the E sound, and xylophone, which starts with the Z. X itself never starts a word with an X sound. We have, however, included the ch, sh and th, as these are sounds in their own right. There are not 6 pictures for the y or the z sound, as we couldn't find enough words starting with these sounds that could be explained to young children.